Hey guys, it's Julia. Welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be finally! I'm super excited to be reviewing for you guys the new Anastasia Beverly Hills Riviera palette. I've been testing this out for the past week, just doing a bunch of looks on Instagram. I think I posted a look pretty much every single day except for that one awkward day that Instagram just decided to yeet itself straight out of the building. It's not a first impression review. I've been testing this palette out very thoroughly and I've used every single shade in here, so I'm super excited to share my review on this one. And I am a collector, so I do have my collection of Anastasia palettes, and at the end of this review I will be ranking this Riviera palette with the rest of them and just kind of sharing where this one lies in my collection. Be gone, fuck! But if you're new to my channel or you're new to my reviews, basically I just go in. So I do have timestamps in the description box of different things and different parts of the review if you'd like to skip around, but please don't. And yeah, let's do this. I ordered my Riviera palette on launch day from the Anastasia Beverly Hills website, so I believe that was the 4th of March. I did the same for my Norvina palette, I believe. I ordered it on the day of the launch directly from the ABH website because it came out in Sephora, I think, a couple days later, and I really wanted to get my review up as quickly as possible. So last time I didn't really have the most positive experience from ABH. I had a really hard time getting my shipping number, and the package did end up arriving a little bit late despite me living literally like an hour's drive away from where the ABH warehouse is, so that was interesting. So I was hoping to have a better experience this time. Honestly, I probably would have rather just ordered from Sephora because I would have gotten points first of all, and it probably just would have arrived at the same time. And then as always, this palette is $42 like the rest of the Anastasia palettes. My first step in every review is just kind of break down the color story and just really
dissect and understand
this palette. Okay. First of all, I really like the outer packaging. It is striped fabric canvas and it's really, really nice and sturdy. Again, it's that same size as regular Anastasia palettes. And as much as I love the velvet outer for the Norvina palette, the Modern Renaissance, Subculture, and Soft Glam, this can get really dirty really easily, and this will still probably get dirty. I can imagine this getting really grimy in a couple months of wear, but it seems that they are moving away from the velvet palettes, which I don't know how I feel about, and that might just be for their limited edition stuff, but yeah. But here is the color story, and bitch is beautiful. Usually their palettes have a very clear color story and they do colorful shades, but I feel like it was really needed to have this nice brights palette in their collection, and I think Norvina did a really beautiful job with this color scheme. Kind of like the Norvina palette, it's all mattes on the bottom and then pretty much all shimmers on the top except for this one matte white shade right here. This time there are no glitter infused mattes, which I really appreciate, but I think it's really gorgeous. I love that it's mostly mattes in here because that's just generally what I use most in the eye look, but the shimmers in here, you have a really nice mix of really foiled shades and then some softer ones as well, and I think it's a well put together color scheme. Later on in the video I'm going to talk about what I wish would have been in here instead, but overall I think it's a really gorgeous, just very eye-catching, mostly warm-toned, colorful palette. It's not rainbow, so I feel like that's kind of something I've gotten really tired of, is just over and over seeing these rainbow palettes, and this isn't that, so I really like that in a colorful palette. But I'm gonna go ahead and jump into swatches because that's what everyone's here for, honestly. ASMR, I don't know that bitch. Swatching is where it's at. As always with my swatches, I just do a 1-2 swipe in the mattes, straight onto the arm, and then with shimmers, again, just one swipe in there and then straight onto the arm. I do swatching on a dry, crusty ass arm because it's super, super dry here in California, but cue the swatch. Now I want to jump into the kind of shade by shade breakdown, so I'm kind of just going to go through literally every single color in the palette and just share my thoughts. I used every single shade at a minimum one time. I think I've used Bahamas in literally every look I've done with this palette. So starting from the top, Sales is the matte white shade. This is one of the best matte white shades I've ever used in my life. Matte white is a very, very hard color to formulate. Matte black is also pretty difficult, so I knew Anastasia does a really good matte black, but I was nervous to see how they would do matte white, and this does not disappoint. But it packs enough pigmentation that it actually shows up white on the eyes. I feel like the Morphe James Charles one is very, very sheer and very translucent. That one was pretty disappointing, but this one I feel like is a really, really good shade to just pat all over the lid if you want a nice shock of white. I also really like this one layered under inner corner highlights. It's just a beautiful matte white. Next up is this kind of bronzy khaki soft gold shade here called Yacht. And this is one of those softer shimmers. It is not super foiled and it's not super like high impact, I guess. So kind of like the shimmers in the Modern Renaissance, as you can see here. Primavera and Tempera definitely are bright on the eyes, but they're not like super glittery and super foiled. Whereas in the Soft Glam palette, you can see Bronze and Sultry right here. They have a lot more metallic and a lot more chunky, I guess. Chunky. This I think would be a really beautiful, just like neutral lid shade on someone who has a darker complexion. On me, it's a little bit darker than my natural skin tone, so I kind of just like doing a very simple look with this one where I'll just dust a little bit of like neutral brown transition shade or bronzer into my crease and then put this all over the lid, and it's just simple, natural, really pretty. I do recommend using this one with a finger, but it's fine with a brush as well. This blue shimmer shade here called Seychelles is probably one of the more exciting shades in the palette. It's a really beautiful blue metallic shimmer, and this one is a bit more foiled. Anastasia really never does any blues, so I was super excited about this one. This I feel like is just such a good shade for summer.
Vibes, dude. Vibes. Summer vibes, dude.
It is stunning. It does not take a lot of like work to get this to show up on the eyes, and it performed really, really well. Next up is Palermo, which is a really beautiful like dusty kind of rose shade. This one is also metallic, and I was kind of disappointed with this one just because I wanted a little bit more brightness, because I felt like Bahamas was such a beautiful, bright, vibrant shade. I really would have loved for this one to be a nice shimmery hot pink as well. Kind of what I had in mind would be this Colourpop Super Shock shade in the shade Slave to Pink. Like this in the palette in the place of this shade. Banger. And I guess the fact that it's a bit more muted makes it more wearable on a daily basis, but then again, this is not a palette I'd be reaching for like daily looks. I kind of wish the shade had been a little bit more punchy, but it does perform beautifully. I just had an issue with the color itself. Next to it is Seaside, and this is supposed to be kind of like a duochrome bluish silvery purplish shade. Unfortunately, I felt like this just showed up straight up silver. I felt like on the eyes the duochrome shift kind of got lost. It shows up really nicely on the arm, but the duochrome just doesn't really translate onto the eyes, and it just looks like a plain silver. So if that's what you want, you could go for this, but I just don't love that. And then next to it is a gold metallic shade here called Inheritance, and this I think is really, really similar to the Fenty Beauty Kilowatt highlighter in the shade Sugar Daddy? No, Trophy Wife. Yeah. Really nice vibrant yellow gold with a tiny tinge of green in there. I really like this one in the inner corner. I'm not a huge fan of how gold looks all over my lids, but this one performs really well and does not have any problems with it. Probably my favorite shimmer in the palette would be Mediterranean. This I feel like is the duochrome gone right. It's kind of a similar concept to Seaside, so I don't know why they had both of these shades in here, but Mediterranean, it's kind of like this steel blue, cool toned like lavender silver duochrome flip, and it's beautiful. It has tiny little flecks of like glitter in it all throughout, so it just picks up this really beautiful like super foiled and glittery look on the eyes, but it's also really easy to work with, and there's not a ton of fallout with this one as well. So I think it's a really unique shade and probably one of the more special colors in the palette. Going down to the row of mattes, Estate right here is this very pale, kind of peachy beigeish brown shade. This on me is a really nice peachy transition shade. I think peach is a really universally flattering eyeshadow color because if you have like pink undertones in your skin or yellow, it's still gonna work really nicely on you. I really like this one. I feel like Anastasia does really, really nice transition shades. Cabana is another shade that people were just like losing their minds over, and honestly, I wasn't a huge fan of this one just because it's a good mustard pukey yellow, and I love mustard pukey yellows, but it just feels a little bit out of place. It's kind of like a grungy shade, and I'm gonna say this in the least weird way possible, but it reminds me of when I get a bruise. This kind of like yellowish ring forms around the blue and the black, and it's just like yucky, but it's beautiful.
What the fuck?
So that is what the shade reminds me of. However, I don't think it really fits with anything else in the palette. So I guess you could pair it with Palm, but with everything else, it just doesn't really fit. And I feel like because you have the pinks in here and the peaches, this mustard yellow just doesn't really jive with the rest of it. It feels like a very straight out of Subculture, which is, I love Subculture, but very different types of color schemes right here. Coastline is next. It's kind of a darker version of Estate, that kind of same peachy beigeish brownish shade. So if you do have a darker skin tone, this will be your transition shade, but for me, it's a nice peachy crease shade, kind of medium. Again, it ties in really well with the shade Estate and easy to work with, and it blends really, really beautifully as well. And next up, my favorite shade in the entire palette is Bahamas. This is the shade that got everyone like freaking hyped. And on Instagram and Twitter, I've definitely seen the most looks using this one here. This is beautiful. I did use it in the eye look today, so you'll see me blending it out later, but it's one of the easiest pressed pigments to blend I've ever used. I would say it's very similar to the shade Skip from the James Charles Morphe palette, that same very, very, very pigmented pink shade, like severely pigmented. But it still blends really easily and it retains that color when you blend it out. So I loved working with Bahamas. However, it is definitely very bright and it did end up staining me every time I used it. So not a huge problem because I do use a full coverage eye base. Even though I haven't had any allergic reactions to this one, I have had staining with the shade here, Bahamas, and then also Monte Carlo right next to it, which is a beautiful kind of like dusty rose pink shade. This is really beautiful for blending out Bahamas if you want a bit of a softer look, or it's really nice with the peachy shades as well. It kind of plays with everything in here and it's just a good essential shade to have in the palette. I think it fits really well with the rest of the color scheme. Can is the matte purple in here. This one, I think it's a really good purple matte. It's really pigmented, it's non-patchy, it blends really easily. The only thing I would say is that if you're using it alone, if you're blending it out a little bit too much, like if you over blend it, it kind of loses that brightness and it gets a little bit just like dull. It doesn't like patch up and it doesn't like just completely disappear. It just doesn't look as bright. I had to layer this one a couple times to get to this nice like neonish bright purple that would kind of be on par with Bahamas, but still I think it's a really good purple matte and it's one of the easiest to blend that I've worked with. And then finally, because Anastasia Beverly Hills cannot just go one palette without putting an obligatory brown matte shade, is Palm. And I love this. I think it's a really, really good. I think it makes a lot of sense with the rest of the palette and it really grounds it. So even though it is definitely a very bright, colorful palette, I think having the shade in here makes it usable for the everyday. So if I want to, I can kind of just do a nice peachy neutral look and then throw on one of the shimmers if I want a nice Riviera look that's not super, super crazy all the time. And I mean, it's not a hard color to formulate, so obviously they did a great job with this one. It's very pigmented, it's very rich, it's layerable as well, so you can blend this one out to be a nice soft brown or a very rich chocolate brown, and yeah, I like this one. Honestly, the biggest problem I have with the color scheme is that there's a couple shades in here I just really wish were in here for the sake of creating more eye looks and not having to dip between palettes. So in here I wish there was one matte blue. It would have worked really well with the Seychelles shade, Mediterranean, even Seaside. I think it would have been a really nice addition. Like a rich kind of mix between teal and cerulean, that would have been so beautiful. You probably could have eliminated one of the peachy matte shades in here and that would have been a gorgeous like rich matte blue shade because Anastasia has never done that before and I think that'd be really cool. I felt like it was overall a really, really good palette and I love this. I think they did a great job with the color scheme. So now I wanted to show you guys some of the eye looks I've done over this past week and a half using this palette. So more dramatic extra ones you've probably seen on Instagram, but like on my own I've done a few just like everyday looks I've been wearing to classes and I really have enjoyed working with this one. So alright, so the first look I posted on Instagram was this one that was just very bright. It was the very first look I did, so I kind of just went for all the colors that excited me in the palette. So obviously that would be Bahamas, Cannes, Seychelles, Mediterranean. But yeah, for this look, I dusted Cannes into the crease. I blended that out with a little bit of Monte Carlo as well. Bahamas, I popped into the inner corner. I cut the crease and I put Mediterranean on the first half and Seychelles on the second half. And yeah, that's pretty much it for that look. Earlier that day for school as well, I did a nice kind of peachy goldish toned eye look. So I used the shades Estate and Coastline in the crease, a little bit of Palm close to the lash line just to add a bit of dimension. And then I used Yacht all over the lid with a little bit of Inheritance in the inner corner. So that was kind of like a peachy, goldy, neutral but not really neutral eye look. Very simple, took about like 5 minutes to do. And then on the day that Instagram decided to go defunct and screw me over, I really wanted to do a look with Bahamas all over my lower lash line just as a very like flash of pink. So for this look that I posted a day late because of Instagram's problems, I used the shade Palm all up in the crease. I blended it out with a tiny bit of Cabana. It looked a little bit weird in person just to have that yellow, pukey mustard shade into the crease and then pink on the lower lash line, but it worked out. I used a different champagne shade onto the lid just because this one doesn't have any like very pale shimmer shades in here, which I'm okay with. But I used a bit of Palermo to blend the champagne shimmer with the brown in the outer corner, so that was on the lid as well. And then of course the pressed pigment Bahamas all over the lower lash line, just blended deep into the dark circles of my eyes. The next day I was really feeling a good bright blue eye look. I decided to go for the blue shimmer shades in here, but I really wanted to be like a fully blue look. So I did go into some other blue mattes. I believe I used the Huda Beauty Sapphire Obsessions palette, but on the lid I tried to use all three of the blue shades in here. But I blended out the deep blue matte in the crease with the shade Cannes, so I kind of did a purple blue look. It kind of looked like a bruise, honestly, but like a fashionable bruise. Seaside kind of exasperated me with this one look because it was just showing up as like a stark silver and I was like, can you please not. Another just kind of like neutral everyday look that I did, I used Sails pretty much all over my lid just to set everything in. I did a bit of palm on the outer corner and just blended that out. It was able to blend out to be nice soft brown, but where I wanted a bit more depth, I would add on just a tiny bit more, so you're able to kind of create this look where it looks like it's two different shadows, but it's really just one, blended out to different intensities. Then finally, I popped a bit of Bahamas onto the inner corner, and that was that look. And then I created today's look, which you will see in just a second from the tutorial portion of the video. So today's look, I am wearing the shades Bahamas, Monte Carlo, Cannes, Estate, Seychelles, and Sails. Alright, so I've started off with my lids already primed, and I'm going to go into the Riviera palette and do an on-screen look for you guys. I don't really know what kind of direction I'm going to take. Again, there's kind of like a hodgepodge of different things in here, so I think I'm kind of just going to make it up as I go. So I just did one eye off camera just to know what I was going to be doing, and I'm going to recreate it on this eye. First things first, I'm going to fluff a little bit of Monte Carlo, which is this kind of like dusty rose pink shade, into the crease. Taking it on my Glamour Dolls number 10 brush. And I'm kind of just like blurring this into the eye socket. We're not really wanting to get a ton of definition right now because I'm kind of just going to work bit by bit. And from experience, this shade has stained me a couple times, so trying to go in with a light hand and build it up as needed so I don't apply way too much. Honestly, if I was doing like an avant-garde look, I would probably just put on lashes here and be done with it, but that was our transition. And now I'm going to go into the big chungus of the palette, which is Bahamas. Everyone's been going like apeshit for this one shade here. I feel like every single Anastasia palette has like one shade where people just lose their minds, and for me it has definitely been Bahamas, which is the bright pink pigment shade. I'm actually going to use the brush that comes with the palette. I've heard a lot of people saying really good things about these brushes, and I normally don't use these brushes, but I figure it comes with the palette. Might as well test it out. I'm going to take the packing brush side, and as you can see immediately, that is such a bright shock of pink. To buff all that out, I'm going to take a little bit of the shade here called Estate, which is a little bit of like a peachy beige shade. Not necessarily as pink as the other two, but I figure it's a good just like in between blending out shade.
It was then that Julia realized she fucked up and added too much peach, so she decided to pretend nothing happened.
Alright, so that is what it should be looking like so far. Really the key is to make sure everything is super blended before you move on. But now I'm going to go ahead and cut the crease with some white base. And for this, I'm kind of just following the natural hollow of my eye socket. I really want this to be, I was going to say natural look, but there's literally nothing about this look that is somewhat natural. And now I'm going to grab a bit of the shade here called Sails. I really have a hard time with a lot of different brands' white shades. The last one I tried, which was from the Morphe James Charles palette, was kind of disappointing. It was actually the only shade I didn't like in the palette, but I've actually been really enjoying this white shade here. So this is really nice for setting the lid and just getting a really nice stark white base. Here's where we get technical. I'm just going to take a little liner brush and spray it with a bit of setting spray. I'm going to go into the blue shimmer shade here called Seychelles. We're going to do a kind of funky blue shimmery liner. I'm starting in the outer corner and starting a little bit thick. I'm going to try and taper it as much as I can so that we don't get transferred to the upper lid, which can happen if you blink and it's too high up in the crease. Oh, crap. I'm going to do a really nice long flick. As you can see, I did it on this side. So I'm trying to stay parallel to the cut crease, but just really flicking it out upwards like we did with the shadow. Oh, okay. I like how that turned out. Continuing on, I'm just going to pop a little bit of this Moira dark blue gel liner on the lower lash line. I'm going to grab the shade Cannes right here and just use that to blur everything out on the lower lash line as well. I'm really taking this purple pretty deep into the eye socket. I naturally have some like bags under my eyes and dark circles, so I'm kind of taking it down into the crease where the bag is, and that really just deepens the eye socket and gives you that kind of like, I have really huge ass eyes Norvina look, so kind of digging it.
Okay.
Taking a bit of the Anastasia Beverly Hills Dream Glow Kit, and I go into the shade here called Magic. Pop that into the inner corner. Just gonna pop the Makeup Shack lashes in the style Dubai onto this eye. Wow.
Wow.
I love it. Alright, that is it. I will show you these eyes up close and personal. I kind of dig it. It's really dramatic. It's very pink, but very colorful, and I think I got to showcase all of my favorite colors. Probably one of my favorite things to do in my review videos is to rank the palette against the other ones from its brand. So obviously, I'm kind of an Anastasia hoe. I don't even know why people follow me on Twitter anymore because it's kind of just me trying to get onto Norvina's radar. I just relentlessly hoe myself out for Anastasia Beverly Hills, and I'm not even mad about it. I technically still do have Prism in my possession. I am selling this one on Poshmark, but I will include it in the ranking today as part of the collection right now. So yeah, 7 different ABH palettes. Still holding my number 1 spot from ABH would probably have to be the Soft Glam palette. These are just my holy grail neutrals. It's just the failsafe that I reach for whenever I don't know what I want to do. Incredibly versatile, really just well done neutral shades, and it makes neutrals not boring for me. I have a short attention span, and I was just getting so over these neutral palettes coming out over and over, so leave it to Anastasia Beverly Hills to just get me excited about brown again. But yeah, I love this. She's my main hoe, she's my number 1, and she's still number 1. And then close in second would have to be Modern Renaissance, not only because I have sentimental attachment to this one, but also I've used her a ton. Clearly, Golden Ochre has taken quite a beating, but I've also had a huge dip into Tempera, which is also inside the Soft Glam palette. This one, I feel like it's a little bit softer than the Soft Glam palette, which is kind of weird, but this one creates very subtle looks. You can do really dramatic looks or really soft looks, which I feel like you couldn't really do with Riviera as much. This is in second place as well. Up in third, I have to mention the Master Palette by Mario. This is long gone, and it's probably never coming back, but on the off chance that they ever do bring it back, I will buy probably 30 of these. It's kind of like this nice earthy toned take on neutrals, and I very much enjoyed this one. So that's my top 3. And now next up for me is Riviera. So this is in a 4th place. Kind of a 3-way tie for 4th place with me. I would probably say Riviera is currently my favorite. When I'm less excited about it in the future, so like after a month when it's not new anymore, this might be not in 4th place anymore, but right now I'm just really enjoying this one. And I think it's a really well done color scheme. It makes me super excited, and I want Anastasia to do more colorful palettes like this because it's fun to use, the formula is well executed, and I've really enjoyed working with this. Honestly, I would probably say Subculture over Norvina just because the color scheme in here is innovative, it's fun, it's inspiring. I can open this one and just like get super excited about makeup, and that's something that's really special to me. So even though it can be a bitch to work with sometimes and the formula does take some finessing, it's a pressed pigment palette, so you can't really expect the same thing that you would from a regular eyeshadow palette like this. I will say though that the pressed pigment shade Bahamas in here performs nothing like the Subculture. This one can be a bit harder to blend, but this one is really easy to blend, and that's probably just out of virtue of the fact that these are incredibly hard shades to formulate, whereas pink is not the hardest to formulate. So, but I love both, and this is in 5th place for me right now, even though I love it so much. I love Subculture. Fight me. And next up is Norvina, but 6th place does not mean I don't love this one. I just think it's not as good as some of the other ones I love even more. It's only in 6th because I just find the color schemes of the other ones a little bit more inspiring, a little bit more fun to work with, and it's not like a go-to palette for me, but I love the shades in here. Definitely very romantic for like Valentine's Day looks, but you get a lot of like peachy tones, but you get a lot of pink tone shades in here, some purples, obviously some browns, but it's just really fun to work with, and the color scheme in here is gorgeous. The only thing I would say is this one's a little bit more fragile. I feel like the shimmers in here are softer than the Riviera palette. Those ones are a bit more hard pressed, whereas these you could literally like barely touch it with your brush and you have a fat dent. And then finally, Prism is last in the lineup just because I am obviously decluttering this one. The color scheme is a little bit too jumbled for me to make sense of it. I was not using this one, so. And then last place is Sultry, of course, because I didn't like it. En conclusion, I love this palette, and I give it my stamp of approval, if that even means anything. And I just love sharing my thoughts on different colorful palettes, especially the ones that are really hyped up, because I love doing colorful eye looks, and I feel like I know most of the time what's a good and bad formula, and I just love trying out different things. So this I love, and I'm very happy that I like it, because I would hate for my favorite eyeshadow brand ever to come out with 2 palettes in a row that I wasn't a huge fan of, but this thankfully has erased Sultry from my mind, so I'm really into this right now. Love this. I think it's a really well done palette. It's very fun, very summery, very just easy to look at, and just gorgeous, and I think it's awesome. So that is it. The Riviera palette is Julia approved, and yeah, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Make sure you are subscribed down below, and also follow me on Instagram to see makeup looks like this posted fairly regularly. I'm getting back into it. And if you made it to the very end of this video, you get the bonus meme. Sorry for being so awkward. Love you. Bye. I am aggressively dewy today.
I don't need friends. They disappoint me.